With the Roto brush tool, you can quickly separate a foreground object from a background across many frames. You can achieve professional results in a fraction of the time you'd spend performing the same task with traditional rotoscoping. In this lesson, you'll learn how to extract a foreground object from the background using the Roto brush tool. You'll correct the segmentation boundary across a series of frames. You'll touch up the matte with the Refine Edge tool, freeze a matte across a clip, animate properties for creative effects, and you'll track a face in footage.
You may be thinking, what in the world is rotoscoping? When you draw or paint on the frames of a movie, you're rotoscoping. For example, a common use of rotoscoping is to trace an object using the path as a mask to separate it from the background so you can work with it separately. Traditionally, in After Effects, you drew masks, animated the mask paths, and then used the mask to define a matte. While effective, this is time-intensive, tedious, especially if the object moves a great deal or the background is complex. So, in this lesson, we're going to use the Roto brush tool to isolate this young boy that we saw in the video before from a wet background so you can color treat the background without affecting the boy. To finish up the project, we'll add an animated title. The files we'll need for this lesson are this boy video and this face tracking movie. So make sure you've downloaded those. So we're going to import the footage file that we needed. So I'm assuming that you have a new blank project, and we're going to click New Composition from Footage, and then go to wherever you have saved your Lesson 9 files. Mine's in Lesson 9 Assets. And we're going to click the boy and then click Import. After Effects creates a composition named Boy based on the settings of the file. The composition is 3 seconds long with a frame size of 1920 by 1080. The movie file was shot at a frame rate of 29.97 frames per second. So let's click File and let's click Save As. Go to your Lesson 9 folder or wherever it is you're saving everything, and we're going to title this Lesson 09 _ finished .aep and click Save. Use the Roto brush tool to specify which parts of the clip are in the foreground and which are in the background. You'll add strokes to distinguish the two, and then After Effects creates a segmentation boundary between the foreground and the background. To use the Roto brush tool to isolate a foreground object, you start by adding strokes to a base frame to identify foreground and background areas. You can start on any frame in the clip, but in this exercise you'll use the first frame as the base frame. Then we'll add strokes that identify the boy as the foreground object. So move the current time indicator across the time ruler to preview the footage. So just drag this across and you can see what he's going to do. And then press the home button and it takes you back to the beginning. Select the Roto brush tool, which is up here. There's your Roto brush tool. You use the Roto brush tool in the layer panel, which you'll open now. Double click the boy movie. That opens the clip in the layer panel. Choose Fit if you can't see everything, so you can click Fit, and that would fit everything in there. If you don't see it all, by default, the Roto brush tool creates green foreground strokes. You'll start by adding strokes to the foreground, the boy. Generally, it's most efficient to start with broad strokes and then use smaller brushes to refine the border. Click Window, and then go to Brushes. We want to set up a hard round 100 pixel brush. So we're going to change this diameter to 100. And you see the hardness, got it like we want it. When you draw strokes to define the foreground object, follow the skeletal structure of the subject. Unlike traditional rotoscoping, you don't need to define a precise boundary. So we're going to start with broad strokes and work down to small regions, as After Effects determines where the boundary is supposed to be. So we're going to draw a green stroke from the boy's head down towards the bottom of the clip. So start right here and just drag down to the bottom of the clip and release the mouse. A magenta outline identifies the boundaries that After Effects has created in the foreground object. After Effects recognized only about half of the boy. Because you initially sampled only a small area of the subject, you'll help After Effects find the boundary by adding some more foreground strokes. Still using a large brush, draw a green stroke from left to right across the boy's coat, including the back strip on the right. So we're going to click here and drag across. We're now going to use a smaller brush to add any neglected areas to the foreground. To increase or decrease the brush size quickly, if you press Control as you drag right to increase the brush size, back left to decrease it. Shortcut. So I'm not going to bore you with, I'm just going to do this, and I want you to take some time and go through and select. And I'm going to pause this and come back. It can be tricky to get some areas without accidentally adding background as well. It's okay if you haven't captured every detail in the foreground. We'll use background strokes to remove any extraneous areas of the mat. If you press Alt on your keyboard, that will switch to the red background stroke brush. And we can remove, for example, this area right here. You want to remove that area. I just held down the Alt key and I removed that area. So add red strokes to background areas you want to exclude from the mat. Switch back and forth until you fine tune it. Don't forget to deselect the area under the boy's hat where the background is. That's the area I just did right there. In fact, one click may be all it takes, and that's all I did. So click the Toggle Alpha button at the bottom of the layer panel. That's this button right here. The selector, let's see, this one, Toggle Alpha, that one on the far left. The selector area is white against a black background so you can see the mat clearly. Click the Toggle Alpha Overlay button. That's the overlay. The foreground area appears in color and the background has a red overlay so you can see what you've done. Click the Toggle Alpha Boundary button again, go back to that. I can see an area that I missed, this little area right here. There. As you use the Roto brush tool, the Alpha Boundary is the best way to see how accurate your boundary is because you can see everything in the frame. So, good time to save what we're doing. I'm just going to click File and Save.